I don't know. Our Lady of Victory. I love Our Lady of Victory. Our Lady of Victory, she used to be called Our Lady of Victory. Now they call her Our Lady Queen of the Rosary. And in my diocese of Duluth, that's the patroness of the diocese, is the Queen of the Rosary, Mary, Queen of the Rosary. But I rarely reference her as Queen of the Rosary. I like the Rosary. I love the Rosary. I love Our Lady. But I like Victory more, so I always just refer to her as Lady Queen of Victory. Amen? Okay, so I mentioned the fact that I only get to work 1 hour a week, and so I get to hang out a lot with doing whatever I want to do, usually basically just kind of eating whatever I want to eat and drinking whatever I want to drink and just spending time with whoever I want to spend with. It's really great. You guys just think about being a priest. That's not true. That's ridiculous. We don't just work 1 hour a week. It's like 3 hours. And so I was over 4th of July, all of my nieces and nephews were at my parents' place with all my brothers and sisters. This is great, this incredible, great time. One of my nieces is named Maren. She's also my goddaughter. And Maren is about 9 years old. And Maren is developmentally disabled. And so it's just such a great thing. It's such a joy to be able to be with Maren. But she's really smart, that she gets these things stuck in her head, and she wants you to repeat them over and over again. So last Thanksgiving, I got to see her, and she was all about jingles. So she'd always come up to me and say, Uncle Father Mike, do this jingle. And so she'd say, Uncle Father Mike, do farmers. And so she'd say, we are farmers, and I'd have to say, or she'd say, Uncle Father Mike, do McDonald's. And she'd go, ba-da-ba-ba-ba, and I'd have to say, or she'd say, do Vonage. And I would have to say, woo-hoo, 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 right? This whole thing. So she does this whole thing. But then this 4th of July, she got off of jingles because her parents were like, Maren, that's enough with the jingles. She came up to me. One of the first things she said, Uncle Father Mike, tell me a joke. Okay, I'm scanning my brain. If everyone ever put you on the spot and asked them to tell you a joke, it's one of the worst feelings in the world because you're like, I know that I've heard of jokes before. So I said, okay, Maren, there's a mommy tomato and a baby tomato, and they're walking along a wall, and the baby tomato falls off. What's the mommy tomato say? Ketchup is the answer. The ketchup, get it, little baby tomato? Ketchup. But Maren is so great. I said, Maren, a mommy tomato, baby tomato, walking along a wall. The baby tomato falls off. What's the mommy tomato say? And Maren looks at me and she says, no. I was like, no, Maren, that's actually really funny. That's probably what a mommy tomato would say. And so it was this, tell the tomato jokes. You say, tell the cookie joke. Why'd the cookie go to the hospital? He was feeling crummy. Exactly. How did the baby get to the hospital? In the wambulance. Or it kept going on. She wouldn't stop because she wants these jingles, she wants these jokes. So it was, okay, what's green and has wheels? Grass. I lied about the wheels. You guys, some of you know this one. What's brown and sticky? Yes. What is green, feels like felt, and would hurt you if it fell out of a tree? A pool table. Exactly. You guys know these things. This is really good. So Maren asked me, do this one, do this one, do this one. Last one would be knock, knock. To whom? So I loved being with my goddaughter. She's my goddaughter, you guys. I got to stand up and profess the faith on her behalf. She became a daughter of God. And I think about this. If Maren was born, if my beautiful goddaughter, if she was born before Christ came onto this planet, she would not be alive right now. She would be dead. They would have killed her. Did you know that in the ancient world, before Christianity came on the scene, is that what you could do if you were the dad of a family, you would, after the wife gave birth, the father would walk in and he would inspect the child. And if the child didn't measure up, they would throw him outside into the wilderness. Just throw them into the garbage. There's actually a place in the garbage heap where you take your babies that were alive that didn't measure up and just throw them there. Sometimes the dad's test would be this. A dad would let the little newborn grab onto his fingers. Little newborns have that instinct to grab on. And the father would then lift up the baby. And if the baby couldn't hold on to his fingers, it's too weak, throw it outside and let it die. This is pre-Christianity. This is before Christianity came on the scene. And when Christianity came on the scene, you had people who met Jesus, and they let the truth of who Jesus was change how they lived their lives. Because Christians came along and they believed something that until Jesus came on the scene, almost no one believed. No, what did they think? We celebrated 4th of July a couple weeks ago. The Declaration of Independence, the opening lines of the Declaration of Independence are, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Do you realize our whole political system is based off of the idea that we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal? False. Well, that statement is false. It's not false to believe that we're all created equal. That's true. It's false to believe that that's a self-evident truth. Because I'm going to look around this room. You look around this room, you would not come to the conclusion that we're all equal. You would look around this room and you'd say, no. There are some people who are stronger than others. Some people who are faster than others. Some people who are smarter than others. I mean, you even have some people who are just better at being human beings than other people. That's just the truth of the matter. It is not self-evident that we're all created equal. You realize this, that until Judeo-Christianity came on the scene, no one believed that all people were created equal. No one. There's no religion, there's no philosophy, there's no political system that ever would have said that male and female are equal. None. That would say that no matter if you're strong or if you're weak, you're equal. There is no religion in the history of humanity until Judeo-Christianity came on the scene that would look at Maren and look at me and say, you two are equal in worth. But then when people met Jesus and God's word revealed that we're all made in God's image and likeness, that's when people said, no, wait, if Maren's made in God's image and likeness, and Pope Francis is made in God's image and likeness, that means we have to treat them both as having equal dignity. And the truth of the matter is this: if this book is wrong, if we're not actually made in God's image, then there is no such thing as equality. There's no such thing as human dignity. That's just the fact of the matter. And yet what do we have? We have Christians who came in contact with Jesus, and they let what they believed change how they acted. And so, you have these stories about, like, plagues would hit Rome, or plagues would hit places in Italy, and people would have their own family members who were dying of the plague, and rather than care for them, what they would do is they take their dying family members and put them outside. Anyone here ever watched the Flintstones? At the end of the opening credits, Flintstones is, Fred puts Dino outside, boom. That's what they would do with their dying family members. Not dead yet, dying, sick. Their family members were at their most weakest. These people would just throw them out into the streets. And then what would happen is Christians would come along. They come with a wagon that they carry themselves. Whenever they found someone sick, or they found someone dying, they would, not even their own family, they would pick them up and bring them into their own homes. And they did this because they believed that all human beings were created equal and are made in God's image and likeness. And so they decided, if we believe this, we have to live like this is true. A lot of them died because of that. But they said, no, if this is true, then we have to live like it's true. Here's the big question, wouldn't they look kind of foolish if that wasn't really true? Wouldn't it be ridiculous to do that if it wasn't actually the truth? I want to talk about the truth for a little bit. Because I think there's a little bit of a crisis we have in our culture right now that's what is the truth? Can you even know the truth? Here's a quick, if anyone ever asked you, what is the truth? I'm going to give you a quick 2-word definition of what the truth is. And this is this. The truth is simply what is. You're like, oh, you really aren't that smart, are you, Father? No, I have to make it really simple. Truth is simply what is. Basically this. A statement is either true or false to the degree that it conforms to what is. Again, a statement is either true or false to the degree that it conforms to what is, to reality. So if I were to say this, if I were to say, there is a chair on this stage, there's a chair on this stage, is that statement true? Yes, absolutely. Look. Rocketeer. But if I were to say there are 2 chairs on this stage, is that more true? Yes, why? Because it conforms more accurately to reality. The statement is either true or false to the degree that it conforms to reality, to what is. There are 2 chairs on this stage. That statement is true because it conforms to what is. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if you've ever heard anyone say this. People say things like, well, that's fine. You might believe in Jesus. You might believe God exists. That's your truth. My truth is something different. You ever heard anyone say that? Like, that's your truth, that's fine. My truth is something else. Well, that's interesting because that is partially true. I mean, there's different kinds of truth. For example, here's a little grammar lesson. There are things called subjective statements. Here's a couple subjective statements. I prefer Dunkin' Donuts coffee to Starbucks coffee. I prefer Papa John's pizza to Domino's pizza. I like to drive a little bit over the speed limit. No, all of those things are true statements, but they're also what they call subjective statements. Why do we call them subjective statements? Because all of them are about the subject. You guys, good job. 5th grade English. You guys are doing really, really well. They're all about the subject. They're all about me. So if I were to say, no, I prefer Dunkin' Donuts coffee, and someone else was here and said, like, well, I prefer Starbucks. If all we had was subjective statements or subjective truth, what it would be like this. I prefer Dunkin' Donuts. I prefer Starbucks. I like Dunkin' Donuts. I like Starbucks. I like Dunkin' Donuts. I like Starbucks. Could you ever get that resolved? Could you ever resolve that argument? You could, but you'd have to do one of 3 things. You'd have to say, okay, I like Dunkin'. I like Starbucks. I like Dunkin'. I like Starbucks. I'm going to win. That's the only way. The first way to win an argument, if all you have is subjective truth, if all you have is subjective statements, the only way to be right is to be stronger. So then might makes right. So I disagree with you. I'm going to hit you in the head. Kicking the shins. I win. Starbucks. So that's one way to win, is if you're stronger, you can beat up the other person and then, okay, your subjective truth wins today. Or else it would be like this. I like Dunkin'. I like Starbucks. I like Dunkin'. I like Starbucks. I would say this. Who likes Dunkin' Donuts more? Who likes Starbucks more? Okay, you guys, that's the fact of the matter is people like Starbucks more. Starbucks is better. End of story. Which is ridiculous. Like mob rule, right? Does the fact that we get more people on our side make something more true? No, not at all. So either you have violence, you have a mob, or you do this whole thing where someone says, I like Dunkin', I like Starbucks, I like Dunkin', I like Starbucks. You know what? See ya. And you have to just walk away. We can't be in a relationship with each other because we can't talk. If all there were subjective statements, we couldn't ever disagree and have that be helpful. The only way to resolve an issue would be either violence, mob rule, or just, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. But the great news is this. There is such a thing as subjective truth about me, about the subject, but there's also such a thing as objective truth. So objective statements would be something like this. You can buy a cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee for $1.99. Papa John's pizza costs about $3 more per large than Domino's pizza. The speed limit outside of the Performing Arts Center here is 30 miles an hour. Now, all of those statements, are they about me? No, they're about an object, they're about something outside of me. What if I did not like the fact that it was 30 miles an hour out there? Would that change the speed limit? No. What if this? Have you ever had this experience where you've been pulled over by a police officer? I never have, but where you've been pulled over by a police officer and he said, do you know the speed limit here? And you said, honestly, officer, I just didn't even know. I didn't know it was 55. Would he say, oh, well, in that case, on your way. It's grace from the state. Like, no, he would never say this. He would say, listen, if you're driving, even if you didn't know the speed limit was 30 miles an hour or 55 miles an hour, it doesn't change that the fact that the speed limit is 55 or 30 miles an hour. Because an objective statement, if it's true whether I know it, whether I like it, or whether I believe it. Up in Duluth, where I work on the college campus, they have created, we live in, basically it's the North Pole. So you from Alaska, we're like the same people. So it is constantly snowing for roughly 11 months out of the year. And so what they did was they built the university with all these tunnels. So you actually could be a freshman or sophomore on campus and never go outside for the entire year. Because you have your dorm connected to your cafeteria, connected to the gym, connected to all of your classrooms. You can just stay inside. And so what could be is this. Someone could say, hey, it's storming outside. And say, I don't like it storming, so therefore it's not storming. Would that change whether it was storming or not? Absolutely not. Because, again, if something's objectively true, it's true whether or not you know it, whether or not you like it, or whether or not you believe it. And there's this next principle. That's a little grammar lesson. Here's a little philosophy lesson. The one thing, then we'll move on. It's called the principle of, the number one most basic philosophical principle is this. It's called the principle of non-contradiction. It sounds complex, but it's really simple. Basically what it means is this. A thing cannot both be and not be at the same time and in the same way. Whoa. Father, you're so deep. I know, right? A thing cannot both be and not be at the same time in the same way. So, for example, there cannot both be two chairs on this stage and not be two chairs on this stage at the same time and in the same way. Does that make sense? Because if there aren't two chairs, that means that there can't also be two chairs. Now, a lot of times, one of my students, they'll always say this, if I'm telling them about this, I'll say, like, a thing cannot both be and not be at the same time in the same way. And they'll say, wait, Father, what about this? What if you had a table and there was a lamp on the table, but the lamp was turned off? It's on, but it's off at the same time. Like, no, fool, can't do that. At the same time and in the same way, right? So, here's a statement. The idea that God exists and he's always with me and watching over me gives me great comfort. Is that a subjective statement or an objective statement? Subjective, right? Because I could say, the idea that God is always watching, he's always with me, gives me great comfort. Someone else could say, the idea that God is always with me, always watching, kind of creeps me out. That's a subjective statement. What about this? God exists. Is that a subjective or objective statement? Objective, which means this. God cannot both exist and not exist at the same time. Either he is or he isn't. Let's move it on. We're here this weekend because of Jesus. What we believe about Jesus is we believe Jesus is God. Jesus cannot both be God and not be God at the same time and in the same way. For example, someone could say, well, that's fine, you're a Christian, you believe Jesus is God. That's your truth. That's not my truth. Can both those things be true? No, because the principle of non-contradiction. Jesus cannot both be God and not be God at the same time and in the same way. So the big question is this, is Jesus God? And we would say yes, but why would we say yes? Well, here's the thing. Jesus comes on the scene 2,000 years ago, and he basically says, I am God. Imagine if someone walked into this room, onto the stage, and said, hello, I'm the resurrection and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. You're like, oh, okay. Well, I don't really believe he's God, but I think he's a holy man. Here's the thing. Jesus comes on, he claims to be God. If he's not, either he's not and he knows he's not, which means he's a liar, which means that Jesus is saying basically, I knew you before you were born, I believe I'm God, I really know I'm not God. Is a liar the same thing as a good man? No. Can Jesus be a holy man without being God? No, because if he's not God and he knows he's not God, he's lying about this and he is not a good man. So maybe he's not God, but he doesn't know he's not God. Maybe he's not God, but he doesn't know that he's not God. Maybe Jesus is just cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Like maybe he's just crazy. And imagine someone walking around thinking like, no, honestly, I believe I'm God. If I walked into this room and said, you guys, I don't know if you know this, but I am the best priest on the face of the earth. You would say like, oh, Father, you are the most arrogant priest on the face of the earth. You're detached from what is. You're detached from truth. You're detached from reality. If I were to say, no, actually, you guys, I don't know if you know this, I'm actually Pope Francis. I'd be even further detached from reality, and you'd be able to spot relatively quickly that, again, I'm a little bit not quite there. If I were to say, actually, you guys, I am Marie Antoinette. Would you like some cake? I would be even further disconnected. If I were to walk in, honestly, on the stage and walked across and said, everyone, hi, I want to introduce you to myself. I am a butterfly. And I really believed that I was a butterfly. Would you pretty quickly be able to catch on to the fact that I'm not quite connected to what is? Yeah, because I'd be so disconnected from reality that it would be ridiculous and very obvious. Here is Jesus who comes on the scene and he actually says, I'm not just the best prophet. I'm not just some guy who's died. I'm not just a jelly donut. Here is this guy who claims to actually be the Lord of the universe, the one who made everything. Jesus walks up to everyone and is like, yeah, I knew you before you were born. See that big yellow thing in the sky? I did that. Just went like this. Son. Jesus claims to be God. If he wasn't, and he didn't know it, he would be the craziest, looniest person you ever met. But here's the thing. Was Jesus lying? Was he crazy? Absolutely not. Jesus came on the scene, and he not only claimed to be God, but he did something else. Again, last time, if someone walked onto the stage, we have this image of Jesus, like he walked, 2,000 years ago, he said, everyone, I'm God, and they're like, oh, okay, Jesus. You know, kind of like, I have to believe him. I'm really dumb. I'm a peasant from 2,000 years ago. We have this idea that people lived so long time ago were just idiots. Because, like, they didn't even know how to program VCRs. I mean, they didn't even know how to work an iPod. I mean, what a bunch of dummies. Like, no. They were just like us. If someone came on the scene and claimed to be God, what would you have them do? Prove it. Exactly. Someone comes on the scene like, you can't, no, listen. I am not going to give my life for you, live my life for you, maybe even die for you, if it could be possible that you're wrong. So prove it. That's one of the reasons why Jesus goes all over the place. In John's gospel, whenever Jesus does a miracle, John calls it not just a miracle, John calls it a sign and a wonder. What's a sign do? Points to something. That sign points to the fact that Jesus is who he claims to be. So, here's a man born blind. Jesus heals him. Why? Because I am who I say I am. There's a paralyzed man. His friends lower him down the roof on this mat. And Jesus says, your sins are forgiven. And they say, whoa. Who but God can forgive sins? And Jesus is like, I know, right? In order for you to believe that I am who I say I am, he says to the man, rise, pick up your mat, and walk. And I think it's just not only incredible that the guy can like move his legs, but also the fact that this guy who's never learned how to walk can walk all of a sudden. Like, I would have liked that when I came to learn how to riding a bike. But Jesus comes up to the little 12-year-old girl, and they all say, Jesus, she's 12 years old. She's dead already. And Jesus is like, stand back. He takes her by the wrist and says, little girl, get up. He doesn't like lean over and start like doing CPR, like, breathe. Come on. And then finally, we heard the story today. Cooper told us about, in John chapter 11, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. Here's Lazarus. He's in a tomb. He's been dead for how many days? At least 3, actually 4 days, exactly. He's been dead in a tomb. He's been dead for 4 days. He is as dead as any dead thing that has ever died. And Jesus says, roll away the stone. And he doesn't go up to Lazarus and take him by the wrist. Doesn't go up to him and like start giving mouth to mouth, which would be absolutely disgusting. What he does, he stands outside of the tomb and does this remote control resurrection deal where he just says 3 words, Lazarus, come out. And the dead guy is no longer dead. The dead guy's alive and he comes out of this tomb. And they all, here's the thing, this is so incredible. At that moment, in John's gospel, it says, from that moment on, many of the Jews who saw what Jesus did with Lazarus came to believe in him. A few verses later, it says, and from that time on, the Herodians and others planned to kill him. Jesus proved definitively who he was. And the only 2 choices are this. Either I believe in him, I belong to him, or kill him. You know, with almost anything else in life, someone gets really excited about like a TV show and like, oh my gosh, you have to watch Lost. It's the best thing ever. You can watch it and go, meh. Someone says, seriously, honestly, the new One Direction song, it's amazing. Like, we dance to this song, and you listen to it and you're like, whatever. Jesus, when it comes to meeting Jesus, there's never a room for meh. There's never room for whatever. When it comes to Jesus, it's either, if he's God, then he gets me. I'm his, I believe in him, or kill him. Those are the only 2 options we have. Because if he's God, if Jesus really is God, is he a God for everybody? Is he the God for everybody? Yeah, absolutely. Objectively true. If Jesus is God, Then what if there's a Muslim living in Turkey who doesn't believe in him? Does that mean Jesus isn't really God? No. If Jesus really is God, and there's some Buddhists living in China, does that mean that Jesus really isn't God in China? No, it doesn't change, because if something's objectively true, it's true whether or not I know it, like it, or believe it. No, I met the Lord Jesus when I was about 15 years old in this powerful way, and I just kept praying and kept trying to get close to him. But then I went to college. When I was in college, I wanted to seek the truth. I wanted to seek the truth of who Jesus was. I took so many theology classes at this college I went to. I was at Catholic school with one of those quote-unquote Catholic schools, and I graduated 4 years later. I took so many classes in theology, I could have double majored in one topic in theology. I graduated with this degree in theology. I became a missionary in Central America, working at a Catholic mission, teaching religion at a Catholic high school, going to daily mass, and I hated the Catholic Church. I wouldn't even say the word Catholic out loud. I would say Christian maybe, but I wouldn't say Catholic out loud. And the reason why is because there were some issues that the church taught on that went directly against the world. And after 4 years of going to this so-called Catholic college, I was very much formed by the world. Some of these issues were this. I want to follow Jesus, but I don't know if I like what the church teaches about abortion. I want to follow Jesus, but I don't know if I like what the church teaches about contraception. I want to follow Jesus, believe he's God, but I don't know if I like what the church teaches about same-sex attraction, homosexuality. And because of that, I let my heart get so hardened to the Lord. Even though I know this was true, I was like, no. I don't like what the church teaches about abortion or contraception or homosexuality. So I became so mad at the church. Even though I knew it was true that Jesus is God. And I knew it was true, not only Jesus is God, I knew it was true that Jesus founded a church, and that church is called the Catholic Church. You don't have to do a whole lot of research to figure out that that's true. Here's this Catholic Church teaching these things, and I let myself get formed by the world rather than by the church that God himself established. And thanks be to God, he saved my life, and he brought me back. He showed me that there are some things that were true. For example, if, like Maren, all men and women are created in God's image and likeness, that means that even a child in the womb that's helpless, that child is still made in God's image and likeness. So even if that child isn't wanted by their mother or father, that child still has dignity. So I'm like, okay, then I can't support abortion. That God made our sexuality in such an incredible way that every act of sexuality is oriented towards both the unity of the couple, but also openness to life. And so I couldn't support contraception, and that was true. Therefore, I have to live like that. And when it came, same thing was true when it came to homosexuality. People with same-sex attraction, this recognition that God made us male and female in such a way that we're actually meant to complement each other. As I bring this up, I know that right now in this room, there are people who that affects their life, and that affects their life, and that affects their life. And even though I can talk about the issue of abortion, for some of you, it's like it's not an issue for me. It's something that I carry, and it hurts me every day. We talk about contraception, and maybe you're a married couple, and you've been doing that as part of your marriage, and you're like, don't talk about this. Or right now, I'm sure that in this room, there are some of our brothers or sisters who experience same-sex attraction. And so for you, this isn't an issue. Or maybe you have someone in your family who experiences this. For you, it's not an issue. No, this is my life. This is people I love. It can be so painful to talk about stuff like this. So painful. I was talking to a mom just not too long ago, and her youngest son, when her youngest son was born, he was born breech. I don't know if you guys know what that is. But basically it meant that his head was the last thing to be born. So his head was stuck for minutes, and he was purple. But doctors revived him. And he went on to be this amazing, amazing guy. This kid is just, he's one of the most talented men I know. He's one of the most just big-hearted men I know. He's the person I love more than anyone on this planet. But his mom would say that, when he was 7, 8 years old, I'd find him in his room and he'd be crying. Like, what's wrong, bud? And he'd ask this question, Mom, why did God let me live? I was born purple. You told me this whole story. Why did God let me live? And she'd be like, what are you talking about? Everyone loves you. You're so talented. Why are you crying? And you wouldn't tell her. And then 13 years old, same kind of thing. She'd find him crying. Mom, why did God let me live? Why didn't he just let me die when I was born? And she'd look at him and say, why? Maddie, his name is Matt. Maddie, why are you saying this? Everyone loves you. 17 years old, same thing. He was crying. 24 years old, 25 years old. I'd sometimes find him and he'd be crying and say, God, why didn't God just let me die? And then when he was 27, about a year and a half ago, he told me. He said that for his whole life, more or less, he's experienced same-sex attraction. And he felt so alone in that. And he felt so unworthy of love in that. He was like, oh, these desires, I'm not supposed to act on this, but maybe it means that I'm wrong. Maybe it means that I'm bad. So why didn't God just let me, if he's going to have to make me live this life, why didn't he just let me die then? And I remembered all those times he cried. His mom didn't have to remind me. I'm his older brother. And I was there every time he was crying and saying, why didn't God let me die? And a year and a half ago, my little brother drove over to the parish I work at and said, here's my life. I have same-sex attraction. I remember he telling me this. I'm like, okay. Gave him a big hug and said, well, you know I love you. That was his big question. First question was, hey, will you still love me? Like, dude, are you kidding me? I love no one on this planet more than I love you. He's known this. When I was 12 years old and he was 2, I made a decision to get in my little brother's life, to grab onto him and never let go. Of course, I'm going to love you. And he said, but would you accept me? I'm like, what do you mean, do I accept you, bud? Because here's the thing. The world gives us these 2 options. And he actually even showed me, he pulled up this YouTube video made by this guy who had this relationship with this other guy. And it was this, it was when they were in a relationship, and when he said, when I brought my boyfriend home, I introduced him to my parents just like, they loved him and they loved us, and they called him Uncle Shane, and my whole family just absolutely loved him. But when Shane told his parents about he and I, his dad said, if you ever come to our front door, I will meet you on the step with a shotgun. And so I'm like, so he showed me this. I'm like, bud, is that my only 2 options? Is it either I accept everything you choose or I'm going to hate you? Because that's a false choice. That's not a real relationship. I'm thinking of one relationship in any of our lives where it's either, hey, listen, you will either accept every choice I make or that means you hate me. There's no real relationship like that in any of our lives. If there's a relationship like that, it means that there's not a real relationship. I mean, I can disagree with some of his choices and still love him. But the way the world gives us these options is this. It's either, if you don't agree with me, then you hate me. But here, you guys, listen. Since when did the statement, I disagree with that choice, mean I hate you? It's not the same thing. When I was in seminary, when I was in college, I took some great classes by this guy named Rabbi Barry Citrin. He's a Jew. He does not believe that Jesus is God. We disagree fundamentally on some pretty important things. And I respect this man, and he was a great teacher of me, and I love this man. I disagree with him. That doesn't mean I hate him. And the same thing is true when it comes to anybody, whether you're related to them, whether they're a great friend of yours. I can disagree with some choices you may make. That does not mean that I hate you. In fact, there's this thing. There's one way, there's the second way, there's a thing that Christians are called, Catholics are called the third way. And the third way is this. It's the way of Jesus. Whenever Jesus met anyone who was struggling with their desires and they were falling into sin, he would always call them out of their sin, but at the same time love them. I don't think Jesus ever met somebody that he said, I just accept whatever you choose, whatever you want. I completely love you, therefore just do whatever. That's the image of a bad, bad parent. That's what my dad once said. My dad was like, well, no parent, he said, no good parent accepts everything their child does. He said, some parents do, but no good parent does. Because the reality is, if there's such a thing as truth, that there's some choices, for example, the sexual genital expression of affection for another person of the same gender is always going to be wrong. But saying that doesn't mean we're not called to love. But we're called to love in the third way, which is, I love you, but I'm going to love you like God loves you. I love you. I'm going to call you closer to him. I'm going to call you up. Some people are afraid, though. They think, no. If you do this, if you live like Catholics live, then you're going to end up bullying people. You're going to end up beating up people. You're going to end up being a hater. Here's the truth, though. The Catholic Church, in the Catechism, you know the big book, the Catechism, this big green book? In this huge big green book, there's 3 short paragraphs on same-sex attraction. And at least 2 of those paragraphs say this. It says, any sign of unjust discrimination against men and women with same-sex attraction is to be avoided. They must be treated with respect and love and compassion. Why? Let's go back to the beginning. Because the same reason why we love Maren. Because Maren is made in God's image and likeness. And every single person on this planet is made in God's image and likeness, which means what? That every person you and I meet as Catholic Christians, we have to treat them as beings made in God's image and likeness, which means this. It's so good. You guys, you're in the right place if you're in the Catholic Church. If you're a man or woman struggle with same-sex attraction, I'm telling you this. There is no safer place in the world for you than in the Catholic Church. There's no better place for you in the world than in the Catholic Church. Why? Because we will always, always say, you are Jesus among us. What if I've fallen in this? What if I've done this? You are made in God's image and likeness, and we will never treat you as less than that. Yes, there's rules. But the deal is, there's rules for all of us. I mean, there's some things that we want that we can't have. One of my cousins, he was roommates with my little brother for a couple years in college. We were talking about this third way. The whole family's just so committed to this. My whole family's just, they love Jesus and they want to be Catholic. And they're like, no, but we're going to love our son. We're going to love our brother. We're going to love our cousin like Jesus would. This third way. Yeah, but what about, it feels like it's really restrictive. Like, here's the church saying no, you're saying no here. And my cousin, he's kind of crass. He comes from the crass side of the family, which I have nothing to do with. And we were sitting at supper one night, and he was like, well, none of us can do everything we want. He said, I want to have sex with women all day and masturbate all day, but I can't do that. I was like, dude, your mom is right across the table. Your dad is right there. Like, you're a very open family, aren't you? That's what. But it's the recognition, of course, is that to follow Jesus doesn't just mean I believe in him. It actually means that I live my life like this. And the church singles out absolutely nobody. It just says, well, that's an especially wrong sin or especially bad sin. God could never love you if you struggle with this. That is not true. That is not true. St. Paul writes in his letter to the Corinthians, chapter 6, he says this. He says, do you not know that the unjust will not inherit the kingdom of God? Don't be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor boy prostitutes, nor people who act on same-sex attraction, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor slanderers, nor robbers will inherit the kingdom of God. Paul gives this list of things that can keep us from God. And he goes through this. He says, he doesn't go through the list and say, and especially those who act on their same-sex attraction. He says, no. Drunkards, robbers, people who act out sexually with other members of the same sex. People who act out sexually with members of the opposite sex, not in marriage. People who gossip. Here's the thing. I don't know anyone in this room who wouldn't be touched by at least one of those things. The reality is this. We're all in the same boat. All of us. And there's not one struggle or one wound that the grace of Jesus can't touch. Because Paul goes on to say, but this is what some of you used to be. But now you've had yourself washed. You are sanctified. You are justified in the name of the Lord Jesus, and now you are God's children. That means all of us. You struggle with drunkenness, God's grace can touch your heart. You struggle with acting out sexually with someone of the opposite sex, God can touch your heart. You struggle with attraction to members of your same sex, God can touch your heart. You struggle with gossip, God can touch your heart. You struggle with lying or cheating or taking stuff that doesn't belong to you, God can touch your heart. There is not one element of the gospel that cannot touch everyone here. That is the truth. Here's the last thing. Jesus is God. That's the truth. Jesus, God, founded the Catholic Church. That's the truth. Jesus is Lord. That's objectively true. The big question for this afternoon is this. Jesus is Lord, objectively true. Is Jesus my Lord? Will I let this objective truth become subjectively true? That's the decision we all have to make. It is true for all people, at all times, in all places. Jesus is Lord. Today, in this place, for you, is it true that Jesus is your Lord? Are you willing to stand on that faith? The faith that says all men and women are created equal. The faith that says all human beings are made in God's image and likeness. The faith that says no matter what your wound is, Jesus is bigger than your wound. It is true, objectively, Jesus is Lord. Do you want to make the decision to let Jesus be your Lord? Are you willing to stand in that faith? Are you willing to stand on that truth? Are you willing to actually, truly make a stand and let this objective truth, Jesus is Lord, become your truth that defines your life?